the old clock on the wall says it's 11 a.m. and I'm not muted, and my video's showing, and you're probably seeing me, and it's working, right, Laura?
Yep.
Okay. We do have a guest speaker before I introduce myself, Suzanne Coleman, who's with the Ollie program and had a few things to say.
Hello. Want to make sure I'm in, you know.
You probably know better than I am.
Oh, yeah, hardly know. We did do a hybrid course last
following
year.
me, so I'm gonna have to stand next to you.
Well, hello there. Hello, I'm Ann Coleman. Thank you very much for being here. And I wanted to thank, I'm with the curriculum committee. I'm one of the co-chairs. And I wanted to be here to thank Jan McCoy for presenting this course. You know, needless to say, a couple of us have given thought to this over the last 8 years, maybe. So yeah, thank you very much, Jan, for presenting this course. You know, and here's
if I might. If you've only been thinking about it 8 years, that's not long enough. Give it some more thought.
And here's the sales pitch. Okay, Ollie is run by volunteers. So if any of you have, you know, an inkling to get a little more involved in Ollie and you want to be a volunteer, please do. If you have a passion for something and you would like to teach, it can be a vocation or an avocation. Please bring it to Ollie, bring it to the curriculum committee. We would absolutely love to work with you. And the last point is after the last class, there are 3 classes in this course. You'll be getting a follow-up survey. We send a survey to the students who are taking courses with the new to Ollie instructors. And it is anonymous for you, and the results will be given to Jan and Laura. The idea is just to help them when they bring their next course to Ollie, so that they know what the students are looking for and you know, how it can help them improve their courses. So once again, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to turn this off and let's give Jan a round of applause. Oh, sorry. For his course. Thank you.
Thank you all.
The first thing we always ask is, can you dim the lights a little?
I have no idea.
Yes, right on. Right here.
So the front bank is here. You can adjust
Is that better?
each one individually.
But can you read your notes?
Oh, I saw on the screen, so no problem. I do have notes, but I'm not paying any attention to them.
How's that?
Thank you. Hi. I actually, when I heard about Ollie, I thought that's interesting. I love teaching. I could probably teach something. My background is I've been working in education for a very long time in lots of different roles. And much of it was teaching Microsoft Office applications, and they said nobody cares. So I went back and thought about it a little further and thought, you know, I'm planning to move out of the US. And at the time I was planning. Now I'm committed, and we'll talk more about that. Maybe others would be interested in knowing a little bit more about what the experience is of planning. I've not moved outside the US. It's entirely likely that someone participating here has actually lived outside the US previous to this, and they may well have some insights that are really valuable. I've planned to move outside the US, and next week I'll be sharing checklists and that sort of thing that will make it so daunting that none of you will consider moving outside the US. It is a very daunting thing. And in fact, if you've been looking at the learner notes page, which I'll talk more about later, but this morning I added a video that I watched for the first time this morning about a couple who moved from Portland to Portugal. And they talk about how it's shown over the time that they were planning and moving. They didn't put nearly enough planning into it. They only planned for a few months. I don't think that's adequate. And so we're planning, we're going, we're here, what are we doing? And it's an interesting video. And I would recommend that you take a look at it. We'll talk more about what's on that website. First, okay, it's got to advance. There we go. There. Sorry, I haven't run Zoom in about 14 months since I stopped teaching for the Department of Human Services. And anything takes a little bit of getting used to. As I said, Jan McCoy My wife and I moved here to Ashland April of last year from Salem, where I was living because I worked for the state. And then I realized I don't need to live here. I can do everything. I'm doing everything from home. So why would I stay in Salem? How many of you have ever visited Salem? Was it just when you were in 5th grade? Because that's when everybody talks about it. I went there to see the Capitol building. If you picked a good day, you might have enjoyed Salem, but it rains there way too much for me. So I just gave it up. Anyway, one of the steps in that was getting rid of a lot of stuff. And we'll talk quite a bit about getting rid of a lot of stuff as we go forward. I've been retired now for, if you add the 2 times I was retired together, about 2.5 years. But I was retired for about 14 months. And then I went back to work for the Department of Human Services teaching for them because I was bored and my wife wouldn't retire. And, you know, if you're just sitting there and she's working and I'm thinking, I don't want to work. Anyway, so I went back to work for a while and then I retired again last November. And it's still a good thing. I would recommend it for anybody who's not yet. Is there anything else I could? Probably not. There's nothing more to tell you about me, but I'll let Laura introduce herself.
I'm gonna turn this on so that the Zoom people can hear me. My name's Laura Andrietta, and yeah, I've known Jan for a while.
I have to come over by you.
Oh, they can see me on Zoom,
Can they?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good.
so you don't have to run around.
No, we can't see you. You're not on video.
I'm on video.
She's not at her house.
Not on
Not at
video.
her house.
She's on video.
Okay.
I think Jan is pinned, so we only see him.
Oh, yeah, you need to change it to, hang on, I'll in the chat, I'll tell you in just a minute how to change it. Once we
You can add another pin, so they're both pinned.
Okay, yeah, we'll fix that in just a sec. Okay, so anyways, yeah, I am currently a learning and development specialist at the Oregon Department of Human Services, which is where Jan and I worked at together before he left us.
And playing hooky,
Yes,
but she's not working for them, right?
that's right. So my wife and I actually are planning to retire in Mexico. I've got about 6 years before I retire, but we started building a house in Manzanillo 2 years ago. So we are doing that a little bit at a time. I'm sure I will share more about that with you later on. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, that's the 2 of us. This was, by the way, an odd coincidence that Laura and I met working for the Department of Human Services, and then I revealed I was planning to move to Bulgaria, which nobody's ever heard of and nobody knows where it is. Even if you've heard of it, you probably don't know exactly where it is. But anyway, and she said, oh yeah, my wife and I are moving down to Mexico as soon as the government pays off all my student loans. And I can afford to retire. You may, the last name, by the way, she wouldn't give a shameless pitch, but I will. Andrietta, you may have heard of. Her wife does a lot with lawn features and water features in lawns. So, but anyway, so, and she's decided that I think she's had about enough of that, hasn't she?
About 6 more years.
Oh, that's way too long. Anyway, so that's who we are and why we're here. I would have invited Laura anyway, because she and I have taught together enough that I know she can handle the Zoom very smoothly. And I would have invited her, but she's also a resource for this. I did say in my earlier emails, my wife would be here, but unfortunately my wife is visiting her sister in Virginia, who's not doing well. So I may get a call from her. And if I do, because she knows I'm in this class, it would be an emergency. So I may have to take that, but I doubt it. Okay, so we are providing you with 2 resources that are really useful, but we're not going to be able to use the Zoom. It turns out if I try to use Zoom in the room, it gets us a terrible feedback, which is kind of an interesting sound, but eventually it gets annoying. So we won't use it in the room. However, we are using learner notes. I mentioned the learner notes. This is the source for some information. I do have some things I said in-class exercises, but we're going to do that because you need to be on Zoom to participate in those. They'll be taking polls, but you won't. You'll be taking polls, but they won't. And I have included a bunch of YouTube videos and a bunch of articles. Be careful with YouTube. If you start watching videos about a place you're interested in, or moving outside the United States, your feed and YouTube will be overwhelmed with those two topics. I know this because my feed is overwhelmed with those two topics. That and late night monologues from the late night hosts. I get a lot of those too, because I'm into that, and I don't stay up late, so I watch them on YouTube in the morning. So one request I had, and I don't recall who asked for it, so I won't mention the name, but a person contacted me and said the learner notes disappear at the end of the quarter. Was you, okay. Because she is so thoughtful to have shared that information with me, this is my first experience with Ollie. What I've agreed for her to do, and I'll do it for everyone, is after the class is over, when I get done adding things, because I'm going to be adding things for a while, I'll PDF the whole thing and send it out to you. The links will still be live. You'll still be able to use things, good Lord willing. And that, I think, will probably be suitable. We have until the end of the quarter, which is sometime in December. So we've got some time to get that out to you. Okay. Learner notes, though, pretty useful thing. I was actually very pleased to discover that was available to me. This is the login. If you haven't been there yet, I've put it in every email I've sent to you except this one this morning because it was too late. And did everybody get the emails? Are y'all getting them? I'm concerned because everybody's in the blind copy, and sometimes that forces things into your junk mail. So those of you on Zoom too, just drop in the chat if you're not getting emails from me, because if you're not, that could be a problem. I've been sending out links and I've been sending out reminders, and I was told that was a good thing. I'm not overly spamming, I hope. I hope nobody's being annoyed by me just yet. I can become a problem, but so this is not happening because it just doesn't work in the classroom. But this is why I'm here. I'm exactly on time, just in case you're all curious. It's always a curiosity for me. I never understand how I can stand and start talking, plan for an hour, and suddenly the hour's up and I'm done. It's just watch. Anyway, the questions for today are, why are you here and why would anyone bother with such a move? It is a tremendous effort. It's a huge planning effort. It's a huge effort to make the move itself, and you're leaving behind everybody and everything you know, almost certainly. And why? What do you gain? I'm not going to tell you, but you need a good reason. When I worked for the Illinois Department of Education, one of the managers there made a big deal about going through finding your why. Why do you do what you do? And I think that's really critical here. If you don't have a really good reason for it, and I frankly have no idea why Laura's planning to move. I'll tell you about me in a little while. But if you don't have a really solid reason for going, you're probably making a mistake. Okay? Why would this be worth your effort and trouble? We do have a poll. I'm going to ask for all of you to think about it, but I'm going to have Laura offer it. I guess I can switch to, I can't. I cannot show that poll in, oh, there it is.
I showed it.
Yeah, but I can't show it to the world.
I can, after they answer it.
But I want to know what these folks are thinking too.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question.
sorry.
And raise your hand if this describes you, okay? And you can't choose more than one, but you can. They can't choose more than one, I don't think, but you can. And so far we have 100% with one of them. Why are you participating in this course? Not why are you planning to move outside the US? Yeah, that's okay. The first offering is, I will be moving outside the US and want to make sure I've considered everything. Anybody actually planning to move outside the US?
Maybe.
Okay. February 15th, I'm flying to Bulgaria. And that's hard to say. I just realized I've been planning this for years. And now I say it and a little bit of emotion in there. I am currently planning to move outside the US for retirement, but don't know for sure when, or something like that, right? You can see the whole questions, right?
I'm currently planning to move outside the US for retirement. That's the second one. I'm considering moving outside the US in retirement. I don't know what you're talking about, Dan.
Well, there's a difference between for retirement, because some people do it because they're retiring and that's the only way. And if you're, I've been retired a while, now I'm thinking of something else. What else you got?
I think I might want to move outside the US in retirement, but haven't started planning. Or I'm curious about why others are moving outside the US for retirement. I am a social person and thought this course might be fun. And I thought this was another course altogether.
Lots of reasons to be here, right? So how many of you, some of you raise your hand, I really am planning to move. A few of you say that. But what are other reasons? Why are you here if you're not actually planning? Is it just, I'm thinking?
Considering.
It's too expensive here. Okay, so you're considering it, but not, yeah,
Considering.
just considering it.
Considering it.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking.
It needn't be. It's my wife and I are going to quite a bit of expense to go. And because I'm into Microsoft Office products, I love Excel. And I tried an Excel spreadsheet and said, okay, here's my budget in actual, and here's my budget in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. And I'm going to spend about $13,000, maybe $14,000 to move from here to Plovdiv. And I will make it all back in 3 months. Because it's that much cheaper. That's not a great reason to go, though. Let's end the poll and we'll go ahead and share the results with everybody out there. And I'll take a look quickly. So among the people out there, I will be moving is 2 people. Let's see, currently planning is nobody. Considering it is 4 people. 11 think they might, and then 6 are just curious. And you got to be curious about this if you're going to. It really has to pique your curiosity, or you're going to panic at some point in your life. If you pursue it without really pursuing it with curiosity. So let's see. There we go. Is relocation popular? Are people moving outside the US? The answer is yes. 700,000 plus Social Security beneficiaries currently receive benefits outside the US. This is as reported by the Social Security Administration. This is not some polling or anything like that. They know where they mail stuff. And 700,000 Americans are living outside the US and receiving Social Security. My wife, by the way, will move outside the US without receiving Social Security. She's not old enough for Social Security yet. Even when she is, we probably won't take it, because if she waits, we'll get more money. And someday we might come back to the US and that money may prove very useful. So we aren't moving on her Social Security even when she is eligible. So she wouldn't be counted among these 700,000 is my point. She's just not in there. This is up 20% from 10 years ago, and this is a 2023 figure. So 20%, now part of that was probably COVID. And people said, the folks in Bulgaria don't get shots. They buy forms that say they got shots. I know this for a fact. I went to visit Bulgaria during COVID, and on the way back, we had to get a test to make sure we get back in the US. And we went to a clinic where they were doing tests, and we gave them, I think it was $30. And they laid our swabs in a pile of stuff and emailed us a successful test, a failed test. You're not positive, yeah. Without, I'm sure, ever doing anything with that swab, except poking it in my nose. And because the people of Eastern Europe, particularly, don't trust the government, they aren't going to do what the government tells them. I know that for a fact, because that's what Patrick, a guy I've known for about 9 years in Bulgaria, told me. And that's why he bought his blank form, or bought his form with the information on it, rather than actually getting a test or getting the vaccination, which was free. So he paid for something he could have had for free and that would have actually been effective. Anyway, people are different in different places. What else do I have to say? Not all the retirees are receiving Social Security benefits, and this is retirees only. So this doesn't consider people who aren't retired, who've moved outside the US, who aren't receiving Social Security. Just this morning, I watched a video and then I linked it from the learner notes, which I think is the very first thing in the beyond the Zoom link. About a couple from Portland, by chance, who moved to Portugal in their 50s. And their son who lives in Paris, was doing the video. And he was just surprised that people in their 50s, you're supposed to be staid and stable by your 50s. And why would you consider such a move? And I thought, well, I would have if I were in my 50s, but I'm not. I'm well beyond that. And yet I'm very serious. I'm going to Bulgaria. So I think it's an ambitious move. It's a certain risk, but it's an excitement. We'll talk more about that excitement. Where are people? 266,000 of those 700 are in Europe. I realize Europe is not a country, just in case you were wondering, because you see all the time on videos that people in America don't realize Europe is not a country. It isn't. Canada, however, is, and 71,000 Americans have moved to Canada and received Social Security benefits. Too cold there for me. 55,000 in Japan. My understanding is Japan is not as welcoming as some countries, so it wasn't on my list. Mexico, 33,000. You know why? Because it's warm there.
Very.
Central America and the Caribbean, nearly 19,000. I'm not sure why Belize isn't more attractive to people. They speak English there. And that would seem to me to be a pretty big draw. I'll talk more about the language issues, but Belize isn't really attracting people. This is a graph just because I like drawing graphs. But you can see most people move to Europe, by far. The majority move to Europe. Partly because we see it as culturally similar and it's comfortable there. More comfortable than, say, Thailand, which is also a great place to go. By the way, if you add those up, I'm not anywhere near 700,000. There are people all over the world. They're just much smaller numbers in different countries. We're not going to do the Zoom poll. I will ask, however, because this Zoom poll didn't get set up. I'll ask before you start talking about this. Why? Why would any of you consider this? You already said it's cheaper.
That's only one reason.
Sure. But
I'm considering France because I love France. I love people. I love everything about it.
and you visited there before.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So,
also I had to wait till my grandchildren were grown up.
all right. So France in particular, because of an affinity for that particular culture and people. That's a pretty good reason. Waiting for your grandchildren to come up, grow up, I don't know. COVID kept you away from it anyway, and you probably still had a relationship. Okay, it didn't you. Okay. Yes.
The only reason I'm considering it is if Trump here.
Oh, political issues.
That's the only.
That's as far as we want to go with
Otherwise,
it.
I would never leave this.
Because there are people who would say quite the opposite. There was a guy who took his wife and 6 children from Idaho, moved to Russia, and because Russia's freer. And when they got, and this was about a year ago. This was about a year ago. So it was because of an alternative perspective on that same political issue. And when they got there, all of their funds in the bank were seized. And they didn't have the apartment they had purchased. They did find enough money to fly back. But their political reasons are big there. Lower cost of living is a really big issue. Many people are trying to take advantage of that. I actually feel a little uncomfortable with that. It feels a little, and I'm taking advantage of it. So I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying I'm a little uncomfortable with they get by cheaper over there, so I will get by cheaper over there. In order to move to Bulgaria, I have to prove that I have income equal to the minimum retirement money coming in for a Bulgarian. If a Bulgarian retires, they get 543 leva a month. Now, you all know the conversion rate for a lev. So 1 lev is worth 54 cents. 534 of them pile up to be about $320 US. So most people in Bulgaria in retirement are living on about $325 a month.
Define living.
They're not dead. For those of you on Zoom, he said define living, and that's a good point. It's how living can you be? Well, if you own your home, which most Bulgarians do, because by the time they're that old, they've inherited 2 or 3 of them. And I'll talk a little bit about population decline and that being a major advantage. You can get by pretty cheap over there. I'm going to go there with a good deal more than that.
Jan, can I share another perspective real quick?
Yes.
I'll come up there because I know the Zoom people, not everybody can hear or see me. So for you really, depending on where you want to go, you want to really research it well, because for Mexico, they don't want people coming in depending on the Mexican social systems there. And so for us to move to Mexico, we have to have, for our temporary residency, we have to have about $4,000 a month in income, plus $76,000 a month in savings that we can show for the past year. It doesn't cost that much to live there, right? I don't know, I looked it up this morning, and for where we're going, it's about $700-800 a month for cost of living, but they want to know that we're not going to be a burden on their system. And so the requirements for residency are much, much higher than a lot of other countries. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, you remind me, Bulgaria also, it's not enough to bring $325 a month. I have to show them that I've had $3,000 in the bank for 3 months. I mean, it's pretty easy to get into some of these countries. Portugal is even easier, by the way.
You mentioned Portugal because I've already tried to investigate some of this and I realized how difficult it is. It used to be with the golden visa in Portugal, if you bought property there, you could work towards, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
now
actually
they've
fairly
stopped
common.
that, and they've stopped that in Spain, so they're making it even harder. In Canada, if you were to buy property there, they charge you an enormous amount of, if you're American, just to buy the property. So I know how difficult it is, and I thought here I could find out a little more about it.
I have a Canadian friend, by the way, and she tells me they charge them an enormous amount of money, even if you're Canadian. So they pay a really high tax rate, but they get a lot for it. So other reasons, lower cost of living is one. By the way, I did put 2 cost of living calculators on the learner notes, and you can put in a city. You can't put in Ashland, it's too small, but you can put in Medford and another city somewhere else in the world, and it will tell you a comparison, how much it costs to buy a gallon of milk, how much does it cost to pay rent, how much does it cost to, one of them is very comprehensive, the other one's easier to use. So that's why there are 2 of them. Did you have something to offer?
Oh, just another reason.
Oh,
When
okay.
you're ready to-
Oh, let me show you my reasons, and then you can tell me, you jump in when you got yours. Many people are looking for a more comfortable lifestyle. Now, that isn't such a big draw in retirement, because how comfortable can you get? I mean, come on, I go walking in Ashland whenever I feel like it. That's pretty darn comfortable. But it's slower elsewhere, and there's far less pressure. This is very common for people who, especially people like Laura, who are portable in their work and who could work from home, and home can be anywhere, although the state government won't let you work from outside the US. So that's a problem. But if you can work from anywhere, you can work from anywhere. So why not? So people pick their whole lives up and move to other countries and work from those other countries. Digital nomads, they're referred to as. And they just save a lot of money. I actually, several years ago, visited Cairo, Egypt. And one of the guys I talked to there said, oh, the perfect model is you work for a company in the US and live in Cairo. Turns out Cairo wouldn't be all that pleasant. There are more than 700 people there. I know it's a huge city. It's not a very pleasant place, in my opinion. He loved it. But if you could take an American salary and go and work in some other country, you can really live well. But you also won't have to put up the pressure if you move there and work for somebody there. That's almost impossible. If you need a job, don't try to move to another country, because they just don't want you. Does that sound at all familiar?
Well, didn't it used to be if you could teach English, they might?
So the point is you can teach English, but typically that requires at least a bachelor's, sometimes a master's degree, not in English, but in something where you studied in English. So teaching is an option. Doesn't pay all that well. In fact, I knew a guy who worked several years in China, teaching English to Chinese, and he worked for a company about half time, made all of his money on the side, teaching private lessons. The companies don't pay very well, but the people do. So, I mean, because the company's taking a big portion of your salary when you're working for them. They find you connections, though. Many people are looking for cultural experience. So I think that's what you were hinting at, Sandra, is you're looking for a cultural experience. Let's look for something different. It's going to be different from here. It is guaranteed going to be different from here. In fact, I'm going to go back and talk about that for just a moment. I mentioned I have a friend from Canada who I've known for more than 20 years. She and I were students together at the University of Oregon working on our advanced degrees. People don't like titles, so. But anyway, she came to the country, she brought her car with her, and at a point she wanted to register her car. So she went to her insurance agent and said, I need to get license plates. And they talked for half an hour past each other, because in Canada, you go to your insurance agent to get your license plate. And here, the insurance agent has no idea what you're talking about. So find a country more culturally similar to the United States and Canada. I can't imagine what it would be. And yet, in fact, the best story was when she went to the international student office on campus, and they said, you're not an international student, you're from Canada. So, but anyway, my point is, even something, in fact, you move from here to Alabama, you will find cultural differentiation that you are surprised by. The same is absolutely true of any other country in the world. The political concerns that were already mentioned, some people are leaving because of political concerns. That's not a great idea. At least not when you move to a place kind of on the spur of the moment. You need to give it some thought. I'm just realizing I'm standing in front of my text, so you can't see it, but I'm on screen and standing in front of it. Anyway, safety concerns. I've heard a lot of people, is that not working?
It is.
I don't think it was following me. Yeah, it is now. That's pretty cool, isn't it? The camera just followed. I so would have given it. I was going to say my right arm, but that wouldn't be any good because I need my right arm to get the camera to work. Anyway, I would have loved to have one of these when I taught full time. Safety concern. I just this morning was watching another video talking about, there are guns everywhere in the US. I'm trying to get away from them. Frankly, I don't see guns everywhere in the US. I'm not feeling unsafe. I'm feeling pretty safe, as a matter of fact. I'm pretty happy with how things are going. I live in Ashland, Oregon. So that's not a concern for me. But in Bulgaria, you can buy a gun if you hunt, which means if you live in a city, it's almost impossible. You have to store the gun someplace away from your home in a place that is secure, because you're only going to grab that gun when you're going hunting, and that's probably not this afternoon without planning anyway. So the approach is quite different. I don't think this is a really good choice either. Moving for safety is probably not the best reason, because we've inflated how unsafe the US is. And we like to think that everywhere else is safer. They just don't have CNN. They also don't have mass shootings, okay? They don't have mass shootings, and I'll grant you that one. But they don't have CNN, so you don't know what's going on in Romania. Do you ever hear a story from Romania? You ever hear anything, even from Italy or even so much France? We don't hear, they hear about it. They know what's going on in the US because they're watching CNN and Russia Today, which also covers the US heavily.
Excuse me, but you can also look up the most democratic countries, and we're not considered that anymore.
Well, we weren't designed as a democratic country, but we're not very democratic. You're exactly right. The people are not well represented here. If you don't agree with me, go to Facebook and sign up with the Ashland, Oregon community group, and they will tell you how undemocratic government is in Ashland. I'm not likely to stay with them. But anyway, the last item on here is adventure. That's the only reason to move. Seriously, because if you're not up for an adventure, you're in trouble, because it's going to be an adventure. I grew up in Iowa and Illinois and moved to Oregon about 30 years ago. It was an adventure. There was a big cultural shift. For one thing, you're probably not going to believe this, but I talk a lot slower than I used to. I say you're not gonna believe it because I tend to talk really fast anyway. But moved here and started teaching, and the most common evaluation was, slow the hell down. I just can't keep up with you. That's a concern. Any place you go, it's an adventure. And if you're going to live there, the adventure multiplies. So if you're not anticipating an adventure, do not consider moving outside the United States of America. It's an adventure waking up in the morning. It's quite another adventure figuring out which food to eat from a list of foods you've never heard of, because they have some other cuisine there. By the way, throughout Europe now, somebody who lived in Finland came to the United States for a while, went to our restaurants and opened Hesburger all over Europe. Hesburger is Burger King in Europe. So we're kind of ruining their cultures and their cuisines too. So did I address your reason for moving? What's yours?
To find a place less pollution, less toxic air, water, soil.
You know, that would be great. But I'm told by all the Bulgarians I meet that it's a terrible mess there. I never see it. They also tell me it's really crowded, which is interesting because in 1990, when they left the Soviet bloc, they went from 9 million people to 6 million people because they very quickly joined the EU, and all the Bulgarians said, hey, I can make more money in Britain, or I can make more money in Poland or in Germany. And 3 million people left. Now that's 3 million people, mostly of working age. That's a loss to an economy. But they claim that the air quality is bad. I've gone everywhere and not found it. I think that's probably a reasonable. I think that your point is a good one. Yeah, well, I wouldn't go someplace that cold, although the saunas are cool. But
Ireland. Oh, Ireland, beautiful.
Retirement means it's time for a new adventure, right? I mean, retirement in itself is an adventure. There are lots of videos on the internet about how to retire. One, they say things like, it's really hard to move from being a saver to being a consumer, because you have to start spending that money you've been saving all your life. That's what you saved it for, right? It's also really hard to figure out what to do with your time. So you volunteer to teach Ollie courses, for instance, because you've been teaching all your life, and now, and even if you haven't been doing it professionally as I have, you've been teaching all your life, you have something to share. You want to fill your time. You want to do something. You can play cards a couple of afternoons a week, but you can't do it every day. It gets boring. So there's an adventure in trying to remake your life in retirement. And mountain climbing might not be the best way to go, by the way, unless you've been doing it all your life.
Hey, Jan,
Yes.
just real quick in Zoom, they're asking that if somebody asks a question or makes a comment, can you repeat it because they can't hear it?
Well, I pretty much am. I mean, I don't know that I've heard a whole lot you can say something about.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep that going. Photos from Bulgaria. It's an adventure to do this. And I know I'm beating this horse, but it is not dead yet. This is a very important horse to keep moving. By the way, other than the cities, this is a bit different. You don't see a lot of great cathedrals in the United States. But other than the cities, Bulgaria looks like Southern Oregon. That's a monastery. They're not common there. Street art. Street art is amazing there. Regardless of where you go or why you're in for an adventure, and be prepared for that. So now we have to make a commitment, right? If you're going to do it, it is a commitment. It requires that you get rid of your stuff and pay for the move. My wife and I, as I mentioned, moved from Salem here, and that was intended as a first step toward moving out of the country. We had a 2,600 square foot house. We now live in a 700 square foot apartment. The guy who got my tools was elated. I got no room for him. Why would I put him in a storage space? I'm not going to fix the apartment. The video I put up just this morning, that was one of the things they really highlighted. Was it was so cool to just get rid of our stuff. Your stuff starts to own you. And my wife and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. After a while, the garage is full and you can't get a car in it. and you don't use much of it. So getting rid of all that stuff can be cathartic and traumatizing. You're going to leave family and friends. That's just all there is to it. It is unquestionably the hardest thing. I have you, Sandra, I believe you're waiting for your grandchildren to grow old or old enough. I have 4 children and only 1 grandchild. And one of my children is going to be 50 soon, and he has no children. I'm pretty sure that's set in stone now. But anyway, I have 1 grandchild. She's 15. She doesn't care about anybody over the age of 20. So she's not much in my life anyway. Her parents come to visit, and she always has some other thing to do because she's a busy person. So I can talk to her via Messenger or something like that. We could do video calls, that sort of thing. Now they're in Coos Bay, so I don't see them that often anyway. I'm leaving them. I already left most of my friends. Laura and I are as close as any of my friends, and she and I have only known each other a couple of years, and we see each other every couple months. You lose friends in retirement anyway. I'm sorry. You do. You lose friends. Yes?
Just to back up, you said it was cathartic and traumatizing. Did you mean that traumatizing to go with getting rid of the stuff or just with leaving the family?
Oh, I'm talking specifically about getting rid of your stuff. It's traumatizing. I'm pretty sure leaving the family and friends will be, but I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
I don't know that experience yet, but I do know the experience of getting rid of all your stuff. And that was really a very interesting experience. My wife and I and our 22-year-old daughters, yes, I have a son who's 49 and a daughter who's 22. Don't ever marry twice. It's just not a good idea. But anyway, I have and then there are 2 in between. My daughter who's 22 was in the basement selling stuff at a garage sale-ish. My wife was up on the first floor and I was in the garage selling our stuff. Hundreds of people came by that day and took our stuff. And it was just, my daughter had the hardest time with it, and she wasn't even living there anymore. But it was stuff that had been around her for years. It's hard to let your stuff go. It's a good idea though. Every once in a while you should. At 40, I put everything I owned into a Jeep Wrangler, not very big, and moved into a dorm at UO. That was traumatizing and cathartic at the same time. But it can be a challenge getting rid of your stuff. This couple that I talked about, the video that I just saw this morning, they've been 30 years in the house they sold in rural Portland. There are pictures of the house. Actually, they have a nice drone video. Trees everywhere. They were so isolated. They moved to Portugal, bought an apartment on a main street. And that week, the students all returned to school. All the college students in town. So they're having parties on the street, and they've been so isolated and quiet in their home. And now suddenly they're in the midst of a major city and things change. Be careful.
Jan, can I share something?
No, I'm sorry. Go right ahead, Laura.
One of the things, in terms of that emotional piece of getting rid of your things, and I think this is true, not just if you're moving, but just as we get older in general, I think there's a tendency to want to hold on to things to pass on to our children. And the reality is they don't want our stuff. They really don't. You know, that priceless china that we're holding on to and that sort of thing, they're not going to use it. And if you talk to your kids, I bet they'll tell you that. So if that's the hang up for getting rid of your stuff or hesitating on making that move, that sort of thing, maybe work on letting that go a little bit along with your stuff, because they really don't care.
My wife has a box of the 22-year-old stuff from school. She's never going to look at that 3rd grade paper. Never going to look at it, but my wife won't let it go. So we're going to keep a storage space in the US because I'm not flying it to Bulgaria. So we'll keep a storage space in the US. That, by the way, is an extremely American thing. If you look into what makes Americans different from other places, there are no storage units in Europe. If you're not using it, you don't have it. What else is going to be a problem? There are going to be cultural differences. I already mentioned cuisine, for instance. Love the cuisine in Bulgaria myself. It's a mix between Mediterranean, so lots of tomatoes and cucumbers and that sort of thing, and more northerly, so a lot of sausages and that, you know, what you might expect in Poland or Czech Republic or Slovakia. no longer Czechoslovakia, but it's hard to drop those things. So it's a very interesting cuisine. So it's, if you move into Greece, which is immediately south of Bulgaria, for those of you not well aware of the arrangement of things, move into Greece, you get that Mediterranean and lose all the sausages. If you move north, you lose the Mediterranean and get all the sausages. So, and Romania is north. So Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. There are going to be cultural differences in a lot of ways. There's also going to be a bureaucracy in government and healthcare, and people talk about Europe particularly being extremely bureaucratic. Although I just saw this morning, Jamie Dimon, who is a major guy with a lot of money and knows everything, ask him, tells me that the US government is as bureaucratic as Europe now, and it's just terrible. It's really stifling things. I don't think that's quite true, but we'll see. And there are going to be language differences in most places. Canada, Australia is hard to get to. The UK, not so hard to get to. They speak English, they don't like Americans. They do kind of, but they got a little bit of a chip, you know, right here. But there aren't just Belize. I mentioned Belize is in Central America and they speak English there. Maybe that's a good idea. But the languages are still different. I mentioned Alabama earlier. You move to Alabama, the language is different, and it's going to take a little bit, but not as long as learning Bulgarian. It's interesting to me too, by the way. I've never heard anybody say, "Oh, that's an easy language." You mention a language and say, "Oh, that was a hard one to learn." You already learned English. Come on, English is English is 5 languages in one, and the rules don't make any sense. So that's going to be a big issue as well. This is the Bulgarian alphabet. I don't think I can point this at that way. A, B, V, K, D, F. They pronounce the name of the letter as the phonetic name. That's really pretty cool. D never says D. D says duh. Well, here it says duh, and it's a D. That's pretty cool. So honestly, I've had an easy time reading Bulgarian. I just don't have any vocabulary. So I read a word and think, oh, that's an interesting word. I wonder what on earth that means. And I'm pretty sure I mispronounce absolutely everything because I haven't heard enough of it yet. I've been assured that most people who move there actually pick up conversational Bulgarian. Claim is you only need about 100 words in any language in about 2 months. But I can read it. I will never forget the day I sat for 20 minutes figuring out what a word was on a building in a photo. And it was information center. And on the other side of it was so dumb. On the other side of this marquee, it said information center in English. But that was the word. Bulgarian particularly has a lot of what are called, I believe, cognates, I think is the term, where the word is the same in English or in Turkish or in lots of different languages. A hill is I'll mispronounce it. Tepe, I believe. But anyway, that's Turkish. Because the Turks were in charge in Bulgaria for about 500 years. They called themselves the Ottomans at the time, but then when they receded, they became Turk. Anyway, this is actually an O, and that's actually an A. This is an H. This is an I. This is a V. So some of that's a little bit challenging. And by the way, you think, well, I'll just get the Cyrillic alphabet down. It's the Bulgarian alphabet. They're very proud of the fact that Cyrillic was invented in Bulgaria. But if you look at Russian, they have 2 additional characters. So it's very much like we use the Latin alphabet. People in Mexico and throughout the Spanish-speaking world have a couple of extra characters that we don't use. That's common. French, too, I think, has a couple of extra characters that we aren't bothering with because we just make all the sounds with a few letters and don't worry about how that letter is supposed to sound. This is a challenge. This is one of the things I am most worried about. So the day I arrive, I will be signing up for language lessons. And as I say, I have been making that effort in advance. Good question. Do a lot of people there speak English? You name a there, and the answer is yes. In Bulgaria, a lot of people speak English, and it's an interesting divide. If you're over 50 and a Bulgarian, you speak Russian. as well as Bulgarian. Calculate that out, that's 1990-ish. It's when the Soviet bloc fell apart. If you're under 50, you speak English in Bulgarian, almost universally. I go into shops, my wife and I have twice, and I will recommend this. I'll talk more about it next week when we talk about the actual move. We have twice taken trips to Bulgaria and lived in 2 cities for a week at a time to see how it is to live there. If you move to another country without ever having visited there, like the guy who moved to Russia, bad idea. That is just a horrible idea. You need to go and spend time, and don't spend time on touristy things. We went shopping for groceries. Because you get an Airbnb, you can cook. So you got all the stuff you need. We spent a week doing shopping, we went to a movie to see whether we could watch a movie. In Germany, all the Hollywood movies are redubbed in German. They're brilliant at it. It looks like the people are speaking German. In Bulgaria, they're a little cheaper. They just put captioning on the bottom in Bulgarian and let me listen in English. So that was a lot easier for me. Unless you're a child, all of the children's cartoons are dubbed into Bulgarian. But Hollywood movies all come out in English. So that's a good thing. So try the things you have to do in life.
Well, you mentioned that the language is what you're most worried about, but in Bulgaria, so many people speak English. What sort of situations are you thinking of that would be problematic language?
Well, the place they don't is, for instance, so the question is, thank you for reminding me, Laura. The question was, if everybody's speaking English anyway, why does it concern me? And the primary reason is because it's rude of me not to attempt their language. Even if I feel silly or foolish, I need to try their language just because I'm not just visiting anymore. But the other thing is, much of what happens in business and government is conducted in Bulgarian, and I have to be prepared for that to an extent. So for instance, I probably will never drive again after 15th of February, because I can only drive for 6 months on my US license, and then it's gone. It's not gone, by the way. Oregon, if you come back while your license is still active, will hand you a new license without you having to do anything except pay for it. But I can't use it in Europe. I wouldn't want to. Have you driven in Europe or even ridden in a car there? The roads are narrow, the people go fast. The only thing people do fast in Europe is drive. It's amazing. But anyway, so I probably won't ever drive again. My wife, who's somewhat younger than me, not tremendously, she's not here to argue this point, insists she will get a driver's license there. The licensing is only, the licensing tests only in Bulgarian. Which is interesting because all the road signs are in English as well. Well, they're transliterated into Latin characters, and we can read them very easily. So even individual street signs. Siskiyou Boulevard would be spelled out in Cyrillic and also in Latin characters. In a way I could very comfortably say, oh, that spells Siskiyou Boulevard. So there's a lot of comfort there. But if I want to interact with the government or with a utility or something like that, that's going to be in Bulgarian. And they probably speak English, and they're not going to. Because by golly, if you're going to live here, shouldn't you at least make the effort? So that's the biggest reason, is that it just is rude of me to move to some other country and insist that they speak English for me. By the way, I expect to use English for a while. But I walked into stores and talked to people who didn't seem to have an accent. Their English was so good. Interestingly, a lot of them have British accents because they studied under a British English teacher. So, but I've had no problem functioning in English there. Can I tell a quick story? Let me see. I only have a few minutes. I'm not going to. I'll save it for next week. It's a great story, though. Just wait. Benefiting from the change, you probably don't need most of your stuff. Seriously, look at your stuff. There's probably a bunch of stuff there you don't need. You can make new friends, although I will warn you, that is hard. because they have friends, they don't need you. And it can be really challenging trying to make new friends there. In fact, the video I talked about, you'll all go home and watch as soon as you get done here. It's about 30 minutes. The guy was talking, no, it wasn't in that video, it was another one, same guy. Said he doesn't have any friends in France to speak of other than other people who've moved from elsewhere. Because they were looking for friends too, not necessarily US. He speaks French, English, and Spanish, so he's got friends who speak each of those 3 languages. And those are the people he hangs with. And of course, I have a friend I've gotten to know over the last 9 years in Bulgaria, and he has befriended me nicely. But one evening he took me to watch a football game with 3 of his friends from high school. He's 50, so they've been friends for a very long time. I felt like an outsider by all assurances. They spoke Bulgarian. I sat there listening. I occasionally caught a word because of some words you hear all the time. But it can be really challenging to make new friends, but it is worthy of the effort. The place I'm moving into, in fact, is a hotel with a cafe attached. It has 1 apartment that's just been built, and I'm going to move into it brand new. In the cafe, there are regulars. There are half a dozen regular people there. People there regularly. We're all regular. But anyway, half a dozen people. I spent a week there last November on my own, just me and Patrick, this friend. And these regulars came in all the time. And I got to know some of them. That's a nice advantage, is that the cafe culture puts you in contact with people who are pretty much consistent customers in the same place. And I would suggest looking for that. You'll find it in most countries other than the US, by the way.
And I'll just share real quick also that for us, when we went to Manzanillo the first time, our tour guide has ended up being basically like family to us. And he actually is overseeing the construction of our house there. They threw a surprise birthday party for me last time we went with his whole family, and they made us food, and it was amazing. One of the waitresses in the hotel we stayed in, we become very good friends with. So you'll pick up friends along the way. It just, you have to be open to talking to people and getting to know them. So.
Yeah, that's where Patrick came from too, by the way. We hired him to drive us around the country when we took our 22-year-old daughter, who's adopted from Bulgaria. We'll make that connection now. We took her back for what's called I don't remember, heritage tour. That's what we call it. And we hired him. He drove us around the country. And then 2 years later, we went back and hired him again. And now after 10 trips, he's a pretty close friend. I've spent a couple of months with him, actually, just never once. So you get to know people that way. Please embrace the cultural differences. Don't challenge people for it. They're different, but they're not wrong. They're just different.
I'm dying to find out why you want to go to why you're going to Bulgaria.
Oh, I love talking about myself. You'll hear. Bureaucracy in government and healthcare is everywhere. Have you tried to use Medicare? Seriously, the only reason you're more successful in navigating the bureaucracy here is because you understand it. It's here. And if you moved here from Mexico and didn't speak English, imagine the experience. Learn new concepts for a new language. One of the things they tell me, and I've never studied a language other than English, by the way, I'll mention that. I'm going to tell you. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I have an associate's in electronics from the Air Force. I have 2 bachelor's degrees in history, a master's degree in history, and a PhD in educational leadership. And I got all the way through all of that without ever studying a language other than English. I did claim Fortran in my bachelor's program. Anybody remember Fortran? Me neither. I remember the name of it, and that's the extent of it. Anyway, at the time they thought computer languages were foreign. If you learn a new language, you also, along with it, learn new concepts. That's just true, and it's worthy of the effort. You don't speak Spanish either, do you?
I do speak Spanish.
You do speak
My wife
Spanish?
does not, but I.
Oh, you're the one who speaks. I knew one of you didn't. That'll be interesting, won't it? Because you can pull the wool over her eyes, and you can say that in Spanish, and no one will understand what it means. Idioms are the most interesting thing. If you've ever studied another language, English is littered with idioms. Other languages somewhat less so, I understand, but people often don't have any idea what you said because you say it so often you don't even think about what it means. Our view of the world, I'm supposed to finish now. I'm going to start here next time. Your view of the world is paradigmatic. It gives you a framework that if you let it, will make things seem totally wrong. We'll talk more about how that works next time. Thank you, one and all. Seriously. I'm sorry. I had envisioned this as a bit more of a discussion, but so many of you wanted to be here that it just didn't work out. There's no way 70 people are going to have a conversation. So thank you. Appreciate it.